Okay, we are live. Oh, and I'm muted. Okay, we're live. Take two. Welcome to Awkward Devs number 124. Let me post the agenda in the chat here. Um, so basically, two big things on the agenda. One, updates on the merge, and then second, decisions about the Arrow Glacier and the difficulty bomb pushback. To start, I guess, with updates on the merge, we had a face-to-face meeting last week with most of the client teams in person to work on the merge. I'm not sure if someone wants to give kind of a recap. I know a lot of the people on the call were here. Yeah, I can give like a very high level one, but I think a dev would be better.
You have to do it too.
You may need to nominate someone.
Okay, so I'll give a high level and then people can fill in the technical details. But basically, the goal of the event was to try and get the different team on the consensus and execution layer to interoperate with each other and to iron out any kind of remaining issues in the spec and basically the consensus spec execution as well as the API between both layers. We did this through like a series of milestones. So basically, they went from just simply implement the spec in your client and pass a set of reference tests, all the way to build a multi-client proof of work to proof of stake DevNet, which runs through the entire transition. And we managed to get most teams through most of the milestones. So we set up several DevNets during the week, basically starting one-to-one, so one consensus client to one execution client, and then kind of growing, many-to-many or passing multiple one-on-ones. And yeah, like I mentioned, towards the end of the week, we were able to set up a kind of temporary DevNet, which had, I believe, 100 nodes, which ran 10,000 validators across a different set of clients. And it started on a proof of work network, went through kind of the transition to proof of stake, and then managed to finalize on the other side. So it was kind of a really good success in that, it showed that we could get all these clients interoperating with each other, that we could get the spec mostly ironed out, and that we had kind of a clear set of things we needed to fix going forward. Talking about that, I guess we've launched just a more stable version of this final DevNet called Pythos. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, which people can join if they want to kind of really experiment with what the post-merge infrastructure would look like. There's still some spec changes to be done, so this is probably not the final version, but I suspect towards the end of this month, we should be done with those. Yeah, I think that's it kind of at a high level. Anything else that I missed that people wanted to add?
Yes, so about Pythos, we started with Amphora during the interop event. This was on a minimal configuration in Ethereum 2, which turned out to be actually more stressful than the mainnet configuration because of the sheer amount of validators. Mainnet configuration is built for this type of net. So we decided to launch Pythos, which is also an Amphora, just a larger one, hence the name. And thanks again, Paratosh, for helping with the DevOps here. If you need nodes or need keys to validate on this network, let us know, and we'll try to facilitate that. And we're trying to stabilize the remaining clients. So far, we have 3 consensus clients running really stable on the network, and Gav on the execution side. Then we're working on getting Besu and Nethermind running well as well.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Anything else?
What is the appropriate coordination channel for the Pythos testnet? Would that just be the interop channel in the merge category on Discord?
Yes, that works.
Okay.
Cool. Any final things about the workshop that people want to share?
I just wanted to say that I finished a differential fuzzer for the engine API. So if execution layer teams are interested, they can fast their implementations against Geth.
Nice. Cool. Can you share? Do you have a public repo for it already, or?
Yes,
Okay.
I can share a link.
Awesome. Thanks. Cool. Anything else on the face-to-face?
So one thing I'd like to share, where I think part of the success of the face-to-face is that we had these clear milestones as coordination points, so we could get clients in the same boat and figure out like how to test with each other. I think we should keep this thing up where we have points of coordination on which spec version are we at and these types of things, because the spec will keep changing. We're changing the API a little bit.
Yeah.
This would really help, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I think, yeah, I was talking with Danny and Mikhail yesterday. I think there's like at least one more large round of changes where they want to fix a bunch of small things. Once that's up, we should probably make that kind of the next milestone for people to aim for, and make it clear that, you know, this is the point where we head towards, and if there's other changes, we can kind of implement it afterwards. Cool. Anything else? One thing I'll ask, I know there was some progress on the sync at the face-to-face, and that basically the implementation is quite different from what Felix had proposed a while back. Is there like a repo or a spec or something that like kind of documents that, or is it basically the Geth PR?
No, there isn't yet a spec, so we do want to update it.
Okay.
But I kind of, there are actually two steps towards that. One, I need to have a long chat with Felix, so that he'll be aware of all the details and whatnot. And the other thing is that we're also trying to figure out one or two open questions before committing to writing it down.
Okay.
So
Right.
we'll try to get it up somewhere ASAP, but there's no updated docs yet.
Okay, got it. Thanks. Cool. Any other just thoughts, comments, questions about the merge in general? Okay. And yeah, one final thing, we put out a blog post on blog.ethereum.org today, kind of also going over the face-to-face. So if people are interested in kind of seeing all the details there, yeah, I recommend just reading the blog post. It should be the most recent one on blog.ethereum.org. Cool. So the other thing we need to go over today is the difficulty bomb pushback. So as we know, the difficulty bomb is going to go live sometime in December, and so if we want to like agree to how far we push it back and when we do so and put out client releases, that needs to happen kind of soon. So I put together a bunch of different options and shared them on GitHub. Basically, there's two kind of decisions we need to make. One is, when do we want to push the difficulty bomb back to, and when do we actually want to have that upgrade? So for the actual Ice Age offset, I'd first propose kind of a value that would push it around basically mid-April of next year. You would start to see some noticeable increase in the block times, and then around mid-May you would see like a second or more increase in block time, which is which starts to be kind of the point where we absolutely have to push it back. And then I also kind of got TJ Rush to sanity check these numbers. He's done a lot of work on the difficulty bomb before. And he agreed that this, this would have, these numbers were right, but he suggested we should probably push it back a little bit farther. So his proposal was we push it back instead of 10.5 million, 10.7, which means the bomb starts to show around mid-May, and then we would have to push it back around mid-June. Yeah, and then there's a middle value there where if you don't want to do 10.5 or 10.7, you could do 10.6, which means early May the bomb starts to show, and then late May the bomb would have to be pushed back. Yeah, I'm curious. What do people think about this generally? Yeah.
Well, since no one else is speaking, so as I see it, this should be the last pushback of the bomb. I think we should not push it back too little and run the risk of like having the bomb disturb when we and interfere with the scheduling of the merge.
Right.
So I think we should rather aim for like, yeah, towards the summer. Next one, when hopefully we should be done with the merge.
Got it. Andrew, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I also unfortunately in Aragon we haven't been able to concentrate on the merge yet. So from our perspective, it probably makes more sense to have a later to push it to a later date. Yeah, so something like out of the options, I would choose the longest.
I guess, does anyone feel like, does anyone have a opposition to the 10.7, which would mean around mid-May, which is kind of the farthest we had there, but like, would people want to go, we could obviously do like 11 million also, and that's, every 100,000 blocks is like very roughly 2 weeks. Yeah. Are people kind of generally okay with, say, 10.7, or would we want to go even further to make sure we don't have to push it back again?
Personally, I think pushing back again is still the better option versus just putting it out way into the future and then.
Right.
So I mean, yeah, sure, pushing it out is an unfavorable thing that nobody wants to do, but it's still the better option that requires kind of developers actively doing something versus we just cannot do something because. So yeah, my vote is to push it, but don't push it too far.
Got it. Micah, you have your hand?
Ansgar's first.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Ansgar, go ahead. And then...
Okay, yes. I think I just generally agree with Peter in that, the whole point of the difficulty bump is to have some incentive to try and do things as quickly as safely possible, right? Otherwise, we could just completely remove the difficulty bump and say we do the merge whenever it's ready. And so if we want to keep it around as at least some token of our promise to do this as fast as a safe merge can be, then I think it only makes sense if it has like a meaningful timeline attached to it, and say it only starts to come into effect in the summer. I think last Orcodevs we were still saying that we couldn't 100% say that we wouldn't do it this year even, and now basically if we already extend this by 6 months, I think it becomes mostly meaningless. At that point, I'd prefer just removing the difficulty bump altogether. So my weak preference would be to go with the April timeline, and then that already gives us room to the end of May or something. And then if we really can't get the merge done by the end of May, which that's definitely an option. But then I feel like it's more honest in a sense to then have like another kind of like chosen delay instead of just, yeah, effectively. I think everything else just makes the difficulty bump kind of meaningless, which is also okay, but I think we should be honest about that.
So the difficulty bump has two purposes. One is to make sure that we are regularly exercising our release process and getting things out on a regular cadence, etc. And the other one is to make sure that when the merge happens, if you want to run a fork of Ethereum, you need to have a release pipeline. I think pushing it out till summer addresses any competitor or any fork needs a release pipeline. It still addresses that, because even if you do run your fork of Ethereum without proof of stake, it is only going to last you for 3 months, so it doesn't do anybody any good. You need a release pipeline, and you get an extra 3 months to get that release pipeline out, but you still need it. And so I think pretty much any date we choose in 2022 solves that second problem. As far as the cadence problem, that one, I think the argument favors doing it sooner, because it, like Ansgar just said, it forces us to behave on a cadence.
I think it also might be helpful to work backwards a little bit. Like, when do we expect to, like, how much time between the final release of the execution clients do we need before the fork goes live? Because just saying mid-April, that kind of almost implies that the merge is ready in the code bases by the beginning of March.
Yeah, I would +1 that. Like, I think at the very least, you kind of need a month, right? And people have kind of complained in the past that like where those delays could be longer. So like, yeah, if you take, say, the farthest option right now, which is like which is mid-May, that basically means mid-April we need like a client release, right? On the execution layer side.
But also for test nets, like how long is each test net going to run? What is our thinking on these things?
Yeah. Peter?
So I would argue that the merge kind of requires a much longer timeline than just a 1 month thing, because generally when we say that that want to give people 1 month to upgrade, that upgrading is mostly just download the new code and swap out your old instances. And of course, for operators who run multiple instances, that kind of means that, okay, you need to upgrade one node, see if it works, then just spin down another node, upgrade it, etc., etc. And we essentially tell them that we expect this to take 1 month worth of effort so that they can find the time to do this, which is a relatively simple task. Versus with the merge, all of a sudden you need everybody to figure out how the beacon clients work, to figure out how to set up one and the other, to figure out how to make them communicate between each other. So it's you're essentially all of a sudden, all your beacon users that are just on the Ethereum 2 chain now need to learn how to run a consensus client, and all the consensus people who are on Ethereum 1 now need to learn how to run a beacon chain client. And I think you don't want to rush that part.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree. You don't want to rush it. I think one thing we're planning to do is when we start having these dev nets, hopefully start to get people running on the dev nets before, so that if they are a large infrastructure provider, they don't learn about this and start kind of setting up their infrastructure when the mainnet releases are out. But I do agree, we probably want like a longer delay. And there's a comment in the chat, why do we have to pick a block number now? So the reason for that is based on the bomb going up in December, depending on when we want to push it back, we also need client releases to be available like at least kind of a couple weeks before the upgrade. So so we can probably kind of fork anytime in like December. Later December will be a bit harder because the bomb might actually start to show, and also it's the holidays, which is just not a great time. So that means that, if say we wanted to fork December 1st, that means you probably want client releases around November 1st, which is 2 weeks from now. And similarly, if we wanted to fork, say, the week after that, you probably want releases kind of the second week of November, which is like 3 weeks from now already. So I think basically making that decision today means we then have a few weeks for clients to actually implement that change and write tests for it, and make sure that we're in a good spot. Whereas, yeah, if we wait much longer, then yeah, it'll just be a very last minute upgrade. Yeah. Light Client, you have your hand up.
It seems like there's two parts of work that need to be done before the merge goes live, and one is kind of a dynamic amount of work, and that's actually finishing all of the things that need to go into a code release. And then there's a fixed portion of work that needs to be done to allow for people to upgrade and to upgrade all the test nets. And it's not clear to me how long that fixed portion is. And I think that it would be easier if we defined exactly what this fixed portion is, and then we target how long we want to spend on the dynamic portion of work.
Right. I mean, off the top of my head, like say you have the merge at date X, you probably want, say you add like some buffers, it means you probably want some like mainnet client releases 2 months before. Say we do twice as much as we usually do. That means you probably also want like some testnet releases a month before that. And so that's like 3 months before the actual merge. And that means that you basically want to have the code mostly ready and in a spot where you can shift it again, say like a month. So that's like 4 months before the actual merge on mainnet, very roughly.
Yeah, so that basically means if we're gonna ship in mid-April or so, that we need to launch these code bases by the beginning of January, which I don't think is reasonable.
Yeah, I would agree there. I think Micah, you said something.
Oh, I was just trolling, but I do have something to say. What was the final decision on the terminal total difficulty strategy that we're going to go with? Last I heard, it was still up in the air. I'm guessing you guys decided at the offsite. Like, are we releasing doing multiple client releases with, first with the TTD and then another one, or sorry, first with all the code, then another one with the TTD, or what was the decision on that?
Well, I guess that's how we also did all the testnets, that you have the code and then you just ship a TTD for a testnet, see what happens. If the testnet breaks, then you just ship some fixes and another TTD for another testnet, and eventually you just put the TTD in from mainnet.
So will all clients have some way of providing that via config, or will people need to download a new version once the TTD is decided?
I mean, I guess both. So at least currently what Geth does is that for normal forks is that you have the fork block number, and it's not set for mainnet, but you can we have a flag override. For example, we had override London, where you could, well, the point of the flag was to postpone the fork if something goes wrong, but you could also enable it if everything goes right, so to say. So my guess would be that we could do something similar for the TTD, where it's part of the Genesis spec, but you can control it with a flag. So you could, in theory, just...
we already have the flag override.
Okay, yeah.
So the concern is, at least, again, maybe I'm a little out of date because I haven't followed super closely in the last 2 weeks. Back when we were talking about this previously, the idea was we wanted to choose the terminal total difficulty like a week or two before it happens, because we didn't want to wait too long, because we were worried about that could, like, the further in advance we try to guess it, the more uncertainty we get. And so we wanted to wait until like a week or two before to choose the TTD. And then the idea is that we would just announce to everybody, 2 weeks prior to that date, whatever that is, okay, this is the exact TTD. Which, and then the discussion was, does that mean we have another release 2 weeks before the actual merge, or do we have like config override, or is there some other strategy that we're going with? And it sounds like we're going with like a mix between new release and config override.
Well, my best guess is that it could be both. So whenever a TTD is announced, clients would do their releases, because for most people it's a lot simpler to just update than to mess with command line flags. But I would definitely say that the command line flag should also be available, because it's always a good backup to if something happens.
Right. Okay. The reason I bring it up in this context of this conversation is just because it does add complexity to the entire merge process for integrators, and so for people, infrastructure providers, etc. So when they are getting their stuff up, even if we release the clients 2 months before, there will still be chaos, near the merge, as people have to do that last minute upgrade or config change or whatever. So just keep that in mind when we're
Right.
like the merge is going to be significantly more complicated for everybody
Yes.
than previous things.
Yeah, and it's yeah. I'm not sure that's something where even if we added an extra month of buffer, it actually helps people, because it's like you just need to do this thing close to the merge, right?
Yeah, it's just like in terms of messaging and stuff,
Right.
like
Yeah,
the kind of the more we drag it out and spread it out, it's just easier to make it clear.
Yes.
Like, okay, do this one thing this week, and then next week you'll have another thing to do, versus, okay, do this today, do this tomorrow. It's more complicated for people is all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So 4 months seems like a pretty generous amount of time to allow people to upgrade and do all of the test nets. What do client teams think are reasonable targets to have the merge code ready to release for test nets would be?
Yeah, the hard question.
Yeah, we still have spec changes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so as I understand it, there's still some work on the spec that hopefully should be wrapped up by like the end of this month. Then, we basically have like all of November, probably like half of December before people start going away. And if we also have kind of the Arrow Glacier fork in December, that also eats away at kind of the time there. So we kind of have, 1 to 1.5 months prior to the holidays, and then people kind of then people come and we have some more time in the New Year's.
Hello.
Oh, hi, Danny. We're just asking, when is the merge going to be done? No, maybe something.
5.
Yeah, sorry. Something you can maybe confirm is, when do you expect kind of the specs to start settling down? You mentioned towards the end of the month to me. Is that still reasonable?
Yeah, we had a number of spec changes that came out of the interop. Most of them were actually simplifications, and most of them had to do with the engine API. And we're working on those right now. I'm doing most of that. Mikhail is on vacation this week, but we'll be picking that up. And the target is to be done with all those changes by the end of the month. And the general agreed upon target by client teams to get a next version of like a persistent testnet up would be a month following, so the end of November. And then there's a lot of security and testing work and hardening of engineering to do. So then as we get into the new year after the holidays, we make decisions there.
Well, we're trying to decide on the Ice Age, which means we have to make some guesses today.
Right. The optimistic launch, if everything goes well, was end of March. And so Ice Age in April makes sense, but we could debate that, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I think one thing we were...
Is that optimistic code complete, or optimistic code complete and gone through all the test nets and a couple of months for people to infrastructure providers to upgrade and download and messaging?
No, not optimistic code complete. Optimistic, we do the launch at the end of March. Realistic is probably plus some amount
What's
of
your
time
guess?
from there.
What's your guess on code complete, ignoring all the other stuff that comes after code complete?
I'm not building the code. So
No, that's fair.
if we have specs at the end of October, what does code complete look like based off of people's experience on the work that needs to be done? Also knowing that pretty much everything is the same except for ensuring some issues in the engine API, fixing some edge cases and things like that. And I think adding the random opcode, which is supersedes difficulty.
Oh, Lucas?
So from my side, the hardest part or saying when will be code complete ready, etc. From the implementer's point of view is all those disaster recovery edge cases, which like even though there's, well, maybe we do know, but we might miss some, etc. And that those will just come in testing. The general specs are, you can more or less tell how much it might take, but those edge cases will be extremely hard to pinpoint and fix all the things there.
Got it. There's a couple comments in the chat about like what's worse, is it, pushing back the bombs 2 times, or like what like alienates the community. My opinion there is like a bad merge is what alienates the community by far the most. So like that should obviously, people will take a good merge with 2 difficulty bomb pushbacks over, a bad merge with 1, because we had to get it out 2 weeks earlier. And I think we kind of saw that also with London, where some people were a bit like unhappy with how quickly we went to mainnet after we found that last issue. And then, obviously people want to merge and like they want it as quick as possible, but like there's no way to like expedite it beyond just doing the work and making sure that it's safe. And yeah, so I don't know, based on all of this, it does seem like trying to get a date that's far enough in the future to give us some buffer, ideally not far enough that it's like completely irrelevant, and that we kind of forget about the difficulty bomb. And I don't think it would be the end of the world to push back the difficulty bomb a second time from like the community point of view, where anyways at that point it's like, if we've taken a reasonable delay for the difficulty bomb and we push it back, it kind of means that the merge is late, and people will be upset about that, not about the fact that we're pushing the difficulty bomb back. So yeah, I guess this is like a long-winded way of saying it. I think I kind of agree with what Peter said at the very beginning, that like something that's like far off but not completely far off. Based on this, if you want like a rough kind of a rough 4 months from like the code quality to like actually going on mainnet, it seems like probably somewhere around like June-ish to have the bomb goes off makes sense, which means you kind of need the code done around February-ish. And obviously if we get there and we realize that's just not going to be the case, then we push back the bomb again. But like I feel like the expectation we set is around the merge and not around like the difficulty bomb. And if we have to push it again, that's less worse than having to like ship the merge too quickly or something like that. Yeah. Oh, Andrew?
Right. So I would like to say that if we commit to this bomb delay, it doesn't mean that we are postponing the merge, because as was discussed, if the bomb goes off in say August, we can it doesn't mean that we have to wait with the merge until August or something like that. So my preference would be to have it to move it to midsummer. So something like a nice number like 11 million would move it to midsummer, and we can, if we are happy with the merge and everything goes smooth with the merge, we can do it earlier than midsummer by all means. So the bomb doesn't force us to do the merge late.
Right. Yeah. And then 11 million would mean the bomb starts being noticeable early July, basically.
Yeah, sounds good.
And yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
I want to piggyback on that. There certainly a week ago there was a lot of optimism as to timelines, and so I don't want to making a longer wait on the bomb shift our expectations on like what we're trying to deliver here.
Yeah, so I think there's like two ways. Like one, it's either you go with, say, I don't think it matters if it's like late June or July, and because it's kind of far in a way, you call it like the generous bomb, or you have like a very aggressive one that there's like a high chance we push back if we don't meet the optimistic timeline. Yeah, and like there's kind of no use, I guess, debating between like mid-June and July. It's like if we go into summer, we might as well do it. And then the other option is like, do we do kind of more like April or May, right? And then assuming we don't meet kind of optimistic to realistic timelines, then we'll have to push it back again one more time. And I guess, yeah, one thing also worth noting is right before you came, Danny, we were talking about how, like, what's the delay you want between having the actual code done and going live on mainnet. So ideally, say you go live on mainnet at date X, you probably want something close to 2 months of like having the releases out so that people can actually upgrade their clients and like run an execution client for the first time, and run a consensus client for the first time if they're on the execution layer. If you do that, that means you probably want to fork the testnets in like the month before, and that means you probably need to put out the releases kind of a few weeks to a month before that. So you have like a kind of generous 4 months between like the code is done and we go on mainnet. We might be able to do like slightly less than that, but that's kind of the buffer, buffer timeline. That makes sense. Ansgar?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one more time that I think it makes total sense to basically on the code complete side, of course, that we like there's no way we could try and rush this. This just takes the time it takes. But then on the I just don't think for months that doesn't seem necessary to me. Like for one, like the once we have the testnet releases, that's already the moment where people can actually start like getting used to running both clients and everything. Everything at that point will basically be frozen, and you already know what steps to go through. So I don't understand why we would basically have to wait until the testnets are forked before people could even start with their 2 months of time that we think they need. So I think that's just like another extra slack month that just doesn't need to be there. And then even on the 2 months side, as Micah was saying, right, like if we only choose the total difficulty relatively close to the merge anyway, and there's like the need for another update anyway, very close to the merge, maybe like even the 2 months kind of don't really make a lot of sense. So I just feel like the 4 months are at least a month, if not too much. But yeah, just wanted to voice that.
Right, and I think
Also something that came up.
Go ahead, Danny. Yeah.
In conversations is that certainly running a test net for a certain amount of time is very valuable. But one of the most critical elements of this is likely the transition process itself. And so having nightly builds in Hive and running it through the ringer, the transitions of the ringer multiple times is much equally of importance, if not higher importance for me on being ready. And so that just a note.
So I guess just to kind of eliminate some options, like, are any of the client teams like comfortable with the bomb starting to show around mid-April? It does seem like, kind of from what everyone has been saying, mid-April is probably too soon unless we go with like the most optimistic timeline. And then, yeah, so I'll stop there. Like, is anyone kind of pushing for the bomb to go off like mid-April?
So one thing to keep in mind is that the difficulty bomb, so if essentially if we expect the merge to go cleanly, then we might also see miners dropping off earlier. Simply maybe you just want to get rid of your hardware, I don't know. So that it's just an option that we might want to keep open, that we might see some hash rate drop before the merge. And if there is a hash rate drop, then the effect of the difficulty bomb is much more pronounced. So
right,
you could actually speed it up. So that's also, I have absolutely no idea how to take this into consideration. It's just something we shouldn't think of.
I think, yeah, that's true. And somebody else had mentioned that on the Alcor Devs Discord also. So it's almost like, and I think the good thing there is, like, if we do need to, we can coordinate another push for the bomb very quickly, like we did with Muir Glacier. So like, we probably don't need to assume, like if it started showing up, it would take us months to fix. But we probably want like at least a couple weeks of like hash rate buffer in whatever number we choose, so that if the hash rate drops, and we kind of move through the bomb quicker, yeah, we're not stuck. And Scar, is your hand still up, or did you forget to?
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay, yeah. I guess
I definitely.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm a bit more pro putting the bomb in May rather than June or July. I think there was a lot of general agreement last week that a moderately aggressive timeline could be achieved, and I don't want to take that momentum out. I think if we set the bomb to June or July, then like I think that's the earliest that the merge is going to happen, just because that's the way things go.
So that means roughly code complete by the end of January, beginning of February.
Yeah, that's what
Is
I would
that
say.
something that client teams feel is reasonable?
I got a lot of head nods of something of a persistent testnet at the end of November for current specifications. I know that doesn't mean code complete, and I know we have holidays then after. So then it's is it realistic to come back in January and harden things such that you're feeling like the code is relatively complete at the end of January, beginning of February?
From a basic perspective, I think what we're most concerned about is adversarial conditions at transition. I think we could be code complete or think we're code complete fairly easily and not necessarily account for all the adversarial conditions. I think that plays into what we think is readiness more so than having code complete.
Right. So
I feel like possibly.
Go ahead.
I feel like possibly it might be more about the ecosystem testing and integrations testing and users testing everything rather than us only. So maybe a bit later bump is reasonable already, because even with this November testnet, this would leave just 4 months, like end of March or February, would just leave 3 or 4 months for everyone else to test how it behaves, and seems tricky.
Yeah. yeah, and for sure that's something we're going to be proactive about. So like, I guess starting in the next couple of weeks, we'll already start to reach out to like large infrastructure providers and try to get them using Pithos and see what like their feedback is and what breaks when they're using it and whatnot. So it seems there's like proposals, I don't know, from like around April all the way to like July, and being mindful of like the impact that like a lowering hash rate might have. Sorry, go ahead, Mika.
Does anybody is anyone willing to die on this hill? Like, or would everybody here be satisfied with whatever a vote turns out?
I think
I get the impression from what I'm hearing is that. Sorry, go ahead, Gary.
I was saying we can always push it further, so it doesn't seem like this is a hill that needs to be died on.
I'm on the edge of dying on the hill, but I also am not writing the software, so.
I think, yeah, my proposal would be to follow what TJ Rush proposed, which is 10.7 million. It means the bomb starts to show around mid-May. There's a world in which the hash rate drops and it starts to show around mid-April, and we need to coordinate either pushing the bomb back or releasing the merge. And if we really, if we're really close to the merge and whatnot, we might be able to wait until to not push it back and have the merge happen in June and still be okay. So it seems to me like a sort of average of the different opinions. It's obviously something we can push back. It's not, and again, I'll stress that like the most important thing is actually getting the merge done well and like out, and no one will care about the difficulty bomb if the merge goes poorly, and no one will remember that we pushed it back twice a year from now if the merge goes well. So I don't know. Does anyone feel very strongly against 10.7?
How distracting would it be to have discussions about diffusing the bomb in March to merge work? Because if we get into a situation where we're like not super comfortable about hitting the target and we need to start discussing like, okay, what is our backup plan to diffusing the bomb? Is this something that we're going to be wasting time that is a really important moment of working on the merge, and we're spending all core devs talking about timelines rather than issues at hand?
I think regardless, that's what we're going to be discussing is timelines at that point. Are we ready or are we not? And the merge being the difficulty bomb being there is going to force our hand in having those conversations, but we're going to have those conversations anyway.
Thomas?
Yeah, I think to some extent I'll repeat what Danny said. I think this conversation now is particularly important. It gives lots of information to how confident teams are, what are they afraid of, what their timelines are, and give the insight into for the community to understand where we go. So
not this minute, obviously. I have a stack of emails to go through.
Then I need something. Sorry,
Mike's
Thomas.
live.
Yeah, Greg, you were unmuted, and yeah, Thomas, were you done?
It's fine. I was actually, I finished slightly more abruptly because of Greg, but I think I was finishing my sentence anyways.
Right, and one thing, yeah, so like kind of, you're concerned about like spending all the time on all core devs discussing the bomb. I think that's something that's also kind of easy to discuss out of band, and for me to come back on these calls and summarize, hey, I talked with all the client teams and like half of them think this makes sense and the other half is not ready or something like that. And yeah, I also don't want to spend like, spend several all core devs just discussing the difficulty bomb. And then there's a comment about having 10.8 instead of 10.7 so that it's like a clean month and we could have a code complete date of February 1st. So 10.7, Danny maps to mid-June. Mid-May, the bomb starts to show. So think less than 0.5 seconds extra per block. And so 10.7 million means we start to see the bomb in May. 10.8 million, we start to see it early June. Again, assuming a relatively constant hash rate. If the hash rate drops, we might see it before that. Yeah, and usually it takes about a month from the bomb starting to show to the delay being like around a second or more, which starts to be very negative. Yeah. Ensgar?
Yeah, just a clarification question. So because you're saying if the hash rate drops, then that would be earlier. But my understanding is that because if it's triggered by a block height, then that would be later, right? Because it would take longer time to get to that block, and then once we hit it, the effects would be more severe sooner. But like basically the moment of start of the difficulty bomb would actually be further out, not sooner. Is that right?
If the hash rate drop, well, not necessarily, because the difficulty will readjust, right, to the hash rate. So like there's probably a point at which both effects cancel each other out. I'm not sure what that one is.
Right, but the adjustments are always they're always lagging behind. So basically, just this right now we have like a 14 seconds or something, right? Roughly block time instead of 15 seconds. So then we would have like a 16 seconds or something, approaching the merge. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think it makes a big difference, but yeah.
I guess, okay, so yeah, there's some comments in the chat between 10.7 and like 11. Do any of the client teams feel strongly that like 11 would be much better for them? Okay.
Well, I think for Aragon, 11 would be better, but we can live with 10.7 probably.
Got it. So yeah, just because there's like a pretty wide range of opinions here, I'm kind of tempted to go in the middle with 10.7. And that means that basically in February, we need to have a conversation about like, how ready are we, and do we think we want to push this back, or do we think we're on the right track to not push it back? And, you know, ideally in the best of worlds, we obviously are ready by February. Does that seem reasonable to people?
I personally want to keep this train moving.
Great. So Danny will make sure we are ready by February. So will I. Cool. Let's do 10.7. I doubt we're going to get a cleaner consensus than this. And now the other kind of big decision we need to make is, when do we actually have this upgrade? So the bomb is scheduled to start showing sometime in December. We probably need a month between the client releases and the actual upgrade on mainnet, because that means kind of probably 3 weeks by the time we announce them and whatnot, and the fork happens. So maybe starting like backwards, like given that we have the number to push back the bomb for today, how quickly can client teams have a release out that has the bomb number, and obviously where we also have tests for it?
Is this a 1 week project, a 2 week project, 4 week project?
Yeah. I can start with my preference. So as a non-client dev, I think December 8th would probably be like the nice sweet spot, where like we're not just rushing all this in the next 2 weeks. We have like an extra week of buffer. And that means we basically we need releases out 3 weeks from now, roughly. And the fork block for that would be 1377 3000. So 13.773 million. Yeah. Does anyone disagree with that one? Thomas Ansgar, I don't know if your hand is still up from last time or if you want to add something. Okay, last chance for disagreement. Otherwise, we're going for 10.7 million delay to the bomb and having Arrow Glacier go live on block 13,773,000, which should be midweek on December 8th. But obviously these things are hard to predict. Cool. That was easy. Those were the two big things on the agenda today. The last small thing was EIP 3607. On the last call, we said we wanted to move it to final, but we wanted to wait to make sure that all the clients had implemented it. So I don't know, do any client teams have an update for this? Or again, the question, any client team have an issue with moving the EIP to final?
Sorry, which EIP was that?
3607. This is the one with like the reject transactions from senders if there's already code deployed at the address.
Right.
Okay.
No objections from me.
Cool. So Andrew, anything else you wanted to add on that, or we're just good to move it to final?
No, we have implemented it in Aragon and we are cool with it.
Sweet.
Also, there should be some tests merged pretty soonish that will require it in the clients. So if you haven't implemented it in your client and the tests break in the next test release, then you know that you should do it. It's 3 lines in Geth code. So
okay. Yeah, that's all I had on the agenda. Anything else anybody wanted to bring up?
I was just say sorry I was 30 minutes late. But if there was any additional questions on merge interop updates, I'm happy to answer those, but I can also take it offline.
One quick question about the December upgrade. So obviously it's a small upgrade, just changing the difficulty bomb block. I know there are still like 20% of open Ethereum nodes operating and open Ethereum's been deprecated. Do you think that open Ethereum would be upgraded for this purpose, or is the expectation that anyone depending on open Ethereum would switch by then?
the expectation is that you should have already switched by now. But I think it's not a big change to update Open Ethereum, and I think someone from the community will probably do it. But that shouldn't mean that you should still run Open Ethereum. You should have switched by now.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody just made the PR to Open Ethereum, but the client is no longer officially maintained. So yeah, and I don't think there's anyone on the call who's still a maintainer of Open Ethereum who can like give more color. Yeah, and we can ask in all core devs after if there is someone who's like willing to do that. But yeah, generally, yeah, the client doesn't have a full-time team working on it anymore.
Got it. Thanks.
Cool. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Well, yeah, I guess that was it then. Thanks everybody, and I'll make a PR to the EIP for Aero Glacier, the EIP for the difficulty bomb and the Aero Glacier spec today, so that we have the updated numbers in them. But yeah, thanks a lot for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye all.